Welcome to the Lifeboat Live. We have 4 simple rules. Number 1, we don't discuss politics, ever. Number 2, this is not a religious channel, and while you might hear people say, God bless you, or I'm going to pray for you, or I wouldn't have gotten through this without my faith, that's fine. What's not fine is to say, my God is better than your God, or here's why you're not getting into heaven. It's not going to fly. Number 3, we believe wholeheartedly if you can't control your tongue, then you can't control your life. So while on board, there's not going to be any cursing in the live chat, period. And number 4, there is no room for mean people on the lifeboat. Because we discuss very sensitive things from people's past in our group setting, we got to protect those people. The only way they feel confident and comfortable discussing those things is in an environment that is free of trolls and mean people. So if you're a mean person or you're a troll, we're going to block you for life. And if your account happens to be less than 24 hours old, we're probably a little suspicious right from the word go. Why? Well, because there are people in this world who enjoy being cruel solely for the sake of being cruel. It's not going to fly here. But if you're here because you're trying to get sober and live your best life, then you might find that the lifeboat is just that, a lifeboat. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and we will see you on deck. Good evening, everybody. I'm Captain Tommy Scoville, and on the other side of the glass, as always, is Captain Mark Wages, and you are on the lifeboat. It's good to be back. You know, it's always nice to take a couple of days off. I was just telling my partner that it's been a just a ridiculous couple of days. It's been very, very busy, and but I'm glad that I'm back. The boat is just something very soothing about the lifeboat. Today's subject matter is going to be a fun one. Hey, Alan, good to see you, bud. Today is going to be a fun one. Hey, Jesse Brown, good to see you. Boy, that's always fun when Jesse's here. Today is going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting sort of a walk down memory lane kind of thing for our country in particular. I know that we've got a lot of people that visit the boat from all over the world. But we're going to be talking very specifically about the U.S. and a lot of the things that are being done with this war that they've got going on to try to make everybody safer, or is the theory anyway. We did a show called we're hated. We may as well get over it, and I think that there's really kind of something to that. On the flip side of it, there's also a certain, I don't know what the right word is. There's it's kind of a situation that, in some ways we're hated, in some ways we're ignored, and in some ways we're just sort of pawns in this whole thing. And we're going to take a look at some of the history of this war on drugs in our country. And the really ironic thing, and maybe sad as well in some ways, is that the war on drugs in this country is spills over the side of this country into the rest of the world. The U.S. wields a lot of power in terms of money. The amount of money that we give away every year to countries all over the world is staggering, and we like to hold it over their heads depending on what their drug laws are. The countries that have gone full Monty, so to speak, and just said, you know what, we're not even decriminalizing, we're just making it legal everywhere. The not new normal. The countries that basically said, this is it, we're going to take this thing and we're going to run with it, got completely cut off. The U.S. is going to be giving them no aid anymore whatsoever. However, they did the math and figured out that, you know what, we're better off, than getting some money from the U.S. and then dealing with all of the problems that this is kicking up. Or that is their theory, whether or not you subscribe to that. I completely understand. But if you go back to 1890 here in the good old US of A, the Sears and Roebuck catalog, which was very much like the Amazon of its day, truthfully, this was the first company to allow you to shop from your home. Right? I mean, that's really what the Sears and Roebuck catalog allowed you to do. Obviously, a little slower than what we're doing today, but you could fill out an envelope and you could go and
get a little money and mail it to these people. And for $1.50, you could buy a syringe and a bag of cocaine in 1890. That's just one of a whole lot of drugs that you could buy out of the Sears and Roebuck's catalog that there were no laws governing, right? These things were not illegal. There was nothing making any of these substances illegal. And we've talked in the past on other shows about patent drugs. And for a long period of time in this country, we had something called patent drugs. And all patent drugs were is just basically heroin, right? Or really large amounts of morphine that they would put into a bottle. And, you know, you hear the term snake oil salesman, because very often they would call it stuff like snake oil, right? Which would cure everything. And, you know, let's be really honest, if you were in pain from anything, you know, these things were going to knock that pain out. If you were having a problem coughing, these are respiratory depressants, really heavy respiratory depressants. So it would take care of that. And they had to pass laws to make it so that you couldn't just randomly put whatever substances you want. And this was sort of the start of the FDA and a lot of other things. So, but in 1890, you could still buy drugs in the Sears catalog. And the reason that I picked 1890, I'm going to turn the ringer off on this phone. I'm sorry, people. The reason I picked 1890 as the year, because up until that point, you could still buy it. But 1890 was a pivotal year because the Morphine and Opium law, tax law or tax act was first levied in 1890. You're going to hear this again and again. A lot of what happened in the beginning had everything to do with tax and nothing to do with protecting anybody from any drugs, right? They were not too concerned about people doing any of this stuff, providing that they were getting paid while people were doing this stuff. All of the sort of the early days of drug intervention in the U.S. All centered around taxes and levies and things like that. So 1890, the Morphine and Opium Act said, we're cool with you doing it, just so long as you pay taxes. So from the mid-18s all the way up to the early 19s, it was the wild, wild west when it came to drugs. You could buy anything you wanted. You could do anything you wanted. There were no laws governing anything in this country. That changed in 1909. And the reason for this was primarily because of all of the people that we brought into our country to allow to work on the railroads. There was a massive number of people that had come from China into the U.S., and they brought with them a habit from back home. And there were opium dens all over the U.S. In fact, you can still go to some of the historic opium dens in places in California, San Francisco in particular, or Chinatown. There are still, some of those buildings are still in existence, where people would go in, give a little bit of money, and literally stay in there for sometimes, you know, up to 3, 4, 5 days of just smoking opium, falling asleep, nodding out, waking up, smoking more of it, nodding out, and doing this until they ran out of money. And then they would either go work or steal or do whatever they had to do. Sounds familiar, right? Except there were no laws to govern these things, but it was the same process of people just sort of getting wasted. So in 1909, they passed the Smoking Opium Exemption Act. And this specifically said that it was illegal to smoke this stuff. They realized how important all opiates were for treating pain in this country. And there were a lot of people that were still cranking out these patent chemicals and patent drugs and getting really, really rich selling snake oil all over the U.S. And they didn't want to get rid of that. It was a very large part of the economy. What they did want to take care of, though, was making sure that people weren't smoking this stuff, because that was starting to get into the white neighborhoods, for lack of a better way to put it. So that was 1909. In 1918, we saw the Harrison Act. Now, this was kind of a big deal. The Harrison Act was the first shot that they took at marijuana. Right? This was the first time that marijuana had any mention for anything in our country. It also made opiates and cocaine was also added to the list. Now, here's the thing. They didn't care if you did it. You could do all of this stuff that you wanted. There were no penalties whatsoever for possessing any of these substances, unless they found out that you took it off a boat into this country without paying a tax on it, in which case there was a fine of up to $2,000. People, you could buy a home back then for about $800 or $900. a $2,000 tax and 5 years in prison if they caught you taking any of these drugs into the US, even if it was for personal use, and not paying some kind of tax on it. Are you seeing a recurring theme? This is not something where they went, boy, this stuff is really bad for the population. I mean, look what it's doing to our poor society. We really need to do something. It was none of that crap. It was, are we getting paid? And this happens again and again and again. Also in 1919, this was the start of the 18th Amendment. And if you know the 18th Amendment, that was no more booze, right? In the U.S., they got rid of the ability for people to consume alcohol. And we all know what happened in Prohibition, right? Whenever you make anything illegal, you give people an opportunity to make a crap load of money supplying it to people that want it. And they didn't just make something illegal. They made something illegal that about 45 or 50% of the population, I found two different numbers, were daily users of, right? This wasn't saying, hey, you know what, we're going to get rid of this, meth, or we're going to get rid of this. Everybody was drinking. Half the country drank every single day. Now you can't get it. And the families that got really, really wealthy, bootlegging and things like that, you hear these stories all of the time. It's remarkable how many families got really, really rich, right? Including the Kennedy family. Made quite a lot of money as bootleggers. And that was repealed in 1933. By the way, that was called the Volstead Act. We don't hear Volstead Act very often in this country because we just call it Prohibition, but it was called the Volstead Act. And in 33, the 21st Amendment was ratified, making it so that you could now get booze again without having to go to a speakeasy, right? An illegal place to pick it up. And it basically did away with a very large criminal element in this country. You know, the Al Capones and the people who got really, really wealthy bootlegging drugs, those days were over as far as that went. Then comes Richard Nixon, right? Well, I mean, technically, I guess you can also talk about 1937, right? In 1937, they got harsher on marijuana. They started to list this as a narcotic. And in doing so, this made it illegal. Now, we've talked about this on the boat before. This was a bill that was shoved through Congress really quickly by people that with ties to Goodyear and DuPont. The reason being they shared a patent on a brand new substance called polyester. Not great for the planet, right? The manufacture of polyester was really nasty at that point, and they used to just have hoses that would dump all of the waste into rivers, because at that point we kind of believed that was acceptable, and so in the process we were really putting a hurt on good old Mother Earth. However, they were getting really rich off of it, and the only competition for this polyester was hemp. And believe it or not, people, at that point, tires were made of hemp. Right, there was so much that we were using hemp for in this country, as a, not as a way of getting high, although that was happening, but primarily as a textile. It was huge. But this, in 37, that went away. Now, 1970. This, people, is where this gets bizarre, and this will be a lot of fun for the people who say that we're right wingers, because this was Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon's administration did maybe the most damage that has ever been done for people with drug problems ever. I say almost, because I'm going to tell you the biggest one later. But Richard Nixon started in 1970. He just started the war on drugs. He was the first person to ever say it out loud, right? We are going to have a war on drugs. He started the Drug Enforcement Agency with a budget of $75 million. Can you imagine? $75 million to fight this war on substance abuse. That was 1,470 drug enforcement agents that were tasked with going out and eliminating cities and the rest of the U.S. from this drug scourge that was coming on. That grew to today's numbers of roughly 5,000 agents and $2.7 billion. Now, that's not the war on drugs. That's the DEA, right? The FBI has an entire division that does nothing but drugs. When you take it all together, it's the second largest budget in the U.S. The war on drugs is just behind the military as the largest amount of money that we blow in this country on our budget for anything, right? Huge money. So they also started mandatory minimums. So now if you got caught with drugs, they were going to say to you, you have this much. The judge has absolutely no ability to give you any less than this much time. And there were people who thought this was a really great idea, and there were some people that thought that it wasn't. This, though, people, disturbed the hell out of me. So I'm going to have to quote this. So in 1994, John Ehrlichman in Harper's, he worked on the for Richard Nixon. And they asked him about the war on drugs and asked him about funding the DEA and all of these things. And he said, there were some ulterior motives in the war on drugs. As it turned out, for Richard Nixon, there were two people or two groups of people that he thought really were going to damage his ability to stay president. And that was the people who were protesting the war in Vietnam and blacks, plain and simple. Those were the target audience that he thought stood the best chance of really damaging him, in his bid to become reelected. So this is a quote, people. We could not make it illegal to be against the war or to be black. Wow. But getting the public to associate the hippies with weed and the blacks with heroin, I'm sorry. Oh, yes. With the hippies with weed and the blacks with heroin, villainizing both would disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders. We could raid their homes. We could break up their meetings, destroy their families, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did. How's that for a quote? So this is the basis for the war on drugs, people. This right here was the start of the war on drugs. And that's from the people that started it. Now, it had nothing to do with saving Americans. It had nothing to do with anything. No, we wanted to raid their homes. We wanted to destroy their meetings, break them up, destroy their families, so that they would look bad on the evening news, and the American people would say, well, we don't want to have anything to do with these guys. We should probably vote for the people who are getting rid of them. Terrifying, right? I mean, honestly, this should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Fast forward, and in the 70s, we started to come around as a country. We started to realize that these people were probably just fighting something that they couldn't quit. The decriminalization of marijuana was almost every state in the union decriminalized weed up to 1 ounce. Then they started to decriminalize other drugs up to a certain amount. The idea being, if you catch somebody with a gram of coke, he's probably not selling it, right? If you catch somebody with an ounce of weed, he's probably not selling it. Instead of targeting those people who are just a victim of this war on drugs or whatever you want to call it, let's target the people that are creating the war on drugs. And the laws started getting stiffer on the people that were actually selling, and they were really getting lenient on the people who were using. Pretty good concept, right? Then the Reagan administration came in, and Nancy Reagan had the Just Say No campaign, and that's kind of where they went until 1986. In 1986, the other party, right, absolutely screwed up. The one I just read to you people, that was the Republicans. Then the Democrats, with the help of, this is a Joe Biden law. He literally, this was the law that Joe Biden wrote. And this was the birth of mandatory minimums. 5 grams of crack cocaine would get you 5 years in prison. Or 500 grams of powder cocaine would get you the same amount of time in prison. Let me run that by you one more time. 5 grams of crack was a mandatory minimum of 5 years. Or 500 grams of powder, over a pound, would get you the same amount of time. And the question becomes, why in hell would you write that law? Because here's what it comes down to. You can turn 500 grams of powdered cocaine, right, even if it's garbage, into maybe 400 grams of crack. If it's fire, you might be able to turn it into 450 grams of crack. If you use the right bonding agent, you could turn it into 500 or 520 grams of crack. However, the laws had mandatory minimums on people at 5 grams, and they had right? Damn near nothing on people that were doing powder. And what this really came down to was their belief that white people snorted cocaine and black people smoked it. And I'm not saying this out of opinion, people. This is what they ruled because they overthrew this, right? I was in the federal system in 2010 when the Fair Sentencing Act was put into the system. This released, I mean, a ton of people that were in there doing these ridiculous sentences because they got caught with crack cocaine. Once again, if you got caught with 5 grams of crack cocaine, you're not slinging it, right? There's a really good chance that that's personal use, but you got 5 years in prison. Now, the guy that was making that stuff, well, he could have got caught on the way back to the house with a pound to go make it, and he was going to do the same amount of time. This kind of ridiculousness in sentencing is something that really started to run rampant, and the 90s got out of control. The Clinton administration came in and built 37 new prisons, right? 27 of them federal prisons. 27 federal prisons. And this is why in 1980, you had 50,000 people incarcerated for drugs in this country. That's a lot. It really is. It's a big number. But by 1997, that number had grown to 400,000. It's very difficult to get a legitimate number on what that is today. But having been there, everybody is in there for drugs, right? I'm not listed on the paperwork as being in prison for drugs, right? It's not what I was in there for. I was in there for robbing banks, which I assure you I didn't do to drive a Ferrari, right? I did that to support a drug habit. So when you start really looking into all of the different crimes that people commit, the driving force, the driving factor in all of these crimes is drugs. Now, the question becomes, do you think that they're doing this to protect people, right? Are they doing this because they care? Well, how's this? I live in Nevada. If we're famous for anything in Nevada, it's probably gambling, right? We're one of the only places in America we're the only place in America. I mean, there's gambling in other states, but you can go into a 7-Eleven and gamble in Nevada. You can go into a grocery store and gamble in Nevada. The running joke is that the only place that you can't gamble in Nevada is the DMV and church. Every other building you go into will have some machines by the exit because they don't want you putting that change in your pocket. They want you to take it directly over, stick it in the machine, see if you can't give them your money. So, if I said to you, what makes this state more money than anything else? A pretty logical guess would be gambling, right? No. We also are one of the biggest mining states. We are the silver state, right? More silver has come out of Nevada than in any other state. So awful lot of stuff here. A lot of money is made in this state from mining, huge mining state. However, that isn't it either. Do you know what the number one moneymaker for Nevada is? How about people paying money because they got arrested? The number one thing that drives money in this entire state is fines, restitutions, things of that nature makes Nevada more money than gambling. Huh? Does that make any sense at all? They sell t-shirts that say, come on vacation, leave on probation, right? Because when you come to Nevada, they're going to try to catch you with some drugs. They figure what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, with the exception of your criminal record, which will follow you back to whatever state you go to. That's really what this comes down to. When you look at this, people, and you start deep diving, you find out that there's a crap load of money in arresting people for drugs. A bunch. This has become such an industry in this country. If you served in the military, God bless you and thank you for your service. But the uniform you wear was made in the federal prison system by guys that were making 30 cents an hour, right? And that's maxing out the pay plan. I think maxing out the pay plan was actually 42 cents an hour. I never got there. I was only there a few years. But it's a slave labor camp is what it is, truthfully. And then the people who are doing this, the people who are working at all of these government jobs inside the prison are being fed by prisoners who cook the food, prisoners that clean up afterwards, prisoners that sew their clothing, prisoners that make their beds, the entire thing. This federal prison industrial complex, if all we did was make uniforms for the U.S. military, you'd go, oh, that kind of makes sense. right? You give people an opportunity to come in, maybe learn some work ethic, right? Maybe learn a skill if you're working on a machine or whatever. When you leave, you could go and say, hey, I've been working on one of those for 15 years. Get a job like that, right? That's the theory. But we don't just make uniforms for the U.S. government. We make them for every government. For real. We're making uniforms for the Israelis. We're making uniforms for all of these different countries all over the world. Do you think that the government then goes to the Israelis and says, hey, boy, did we luck out, huh? We're paying these guys 40 cents an hour. Have I got a cheap uniform for you? I got news for you, people. That's not going on. That's not going on. And I can tell you because I used to have to put the stickers, right, with the prices on all this stuff in there. I mean, this is a money-making. There is so much that just keeps coming back to money. This war on drugs that is so massive, right, that it is the second largest budget in our country. Do you think you could find me anybody on the planet that says we're winning it? You think, I mean, anywhere, the people who are in the process of working this, do you think they would go, yeah, no, we got this. It's under control. No, you couldn't, because we're losing. This isn't a war on drugs. If it was a war on drugs, there would be victories in this war on drugs. There aren't any. By their own admission, they might catch 20% of what's coming across the border. And we've told you what they're fetching, right? What, 15 tons of powder? Hundreds of millions of pills? That's 20% by their own admission of what they think is coming across the border. Well, that's not right? This isn't going very well. So maybe they would learn, right? We can only hope that going forward, since the number one cause of death in our country is overdose, maybe they're learning from this. Unfortunately, that's not the case. If you look up the number of states in this year coming up who are going to have laws that they're going to put into effect on fentanyl, right? Boy, the number of laws in the 50 states that are being written right now on fentanyl is staggering. Now, what do you think those laws are? Well, yet they're not allowed to do mandatory minimums anymore. So the judge could still step in and say, well, I shouldn't say they're not allowed. They're very, very discouraged. Very few states still write mandatory minimum laws, right? Especially for drugs. However, what it's boiling down to is that getting caught with a couple of pills that say M30 on them is going to give you an opportunity to do a lot of time in prison. If you got a couple of those pills in your pocket, you think you're a drug dealer? No, you're a slave. And you're a slave to a drug habit that the federal government had a huge hand, accidentally, whatever, but had a huge hand in creating. They gave the Sacklers free reign to get tons of people in this country addicted to drugs, then yanked the carpet out from underneath all of those people and told all the doctors you got 30 days to get everybody that you're writing scripts to off of this stuff. And as we all know here, no problem, 30 days. I mean, who can't quit opiates in 30 days? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's way ridiculous, in my opinion. It's, and I think that for most of us, I think we kind of see it, but until we talk about it like we are now, I don't think it does anybody any good is to sit around and look. It's nothing's ever going to change if we do it like that, So, I don't know.
How did you like that quote from the Nixon official?
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, these are things that they're saying just completely out in the open, just in your face, like there they are. I mean, that
was in an interview with Harper's Magazine,
yeah,
right, in 1997, and I had to dig to find this. I had never heard that before. How is the whole world not going? Wait a second, what?
What did he just say?
This whole war on drugs has got nothing to do with drugs. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
You just wanted to target blacks and people that didn't think being in Vietnam was a particularly good idea. That was what this was all about.
It's always an agenda behind it, and I think that's all of us kind of understand that, but we never, until you know what that agenda is, you can't really see, and they always hide it. And we always hear this, don't we? Well, what are they paying $500 for a hammer for? Well, this is the same thing. It's really the same thing. So when they're like doling out like who knows, whatever money you want to talk about, wherever they're putting it, this is one of the biggest things when we were talking about the jab, when they were trying to get all that stuff going through. They were throwing money at stuff that had nothing to do with anything, and it's
So
just,
they just add that onto the bill and add that onto the bill. They'll earmark so much stuff in there. Oh, and it's, you know, they're everybody's in on the take. Everybody. So in this war on drugs, do you have any idea the number of police stations in the U.S. in the last 5 years that got a tank? A tank for the war on drugs. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that they did recently in this war on drugs, I guess they figured that Pablo Escobar is going to be in just about every major city, and the house is going to be fortified with 50 caliber machine guns on the roof, and they need an urban assault vehicle in order to get. And you can call it whatever you want.
yeah, it's a tank. Yeah,
It's a tank.
those UAVs are assault vehicles. they're
Right?
tanks. I mean, just
They're
call,
tanks. Yeah, it's all it is, right? But and the need for these, my question becomes, how many of these have been put into use? So you keep these things around, you train with them, right? How often have you had to whip out a tank to go try to get some drugs off the street? Because those people, the guys that are really selling this, the number of huge fentanyl busts that put these massive people in prison, they're not stupid. The cartels, unfortunately, are smarter than we are.
yeah,
Mark, the way this goes down is they send people across the border who know that there's a really excellent chance they might get popped. And if they do, they're probably going to do about 5 years, and then they're going to go straight home. Now, if you had been a citizen in this country, you're going to do more than that. But you come in illegally, you're going to get that 5-year sentence, right? And then they're going to kick you out and send you back. And at which point they've gone rung up the ladder, right? But the people who are getting rich off of this, they're not doing any time. They're not even stupid enough to step into our country. The craziest part is they call them cells. Right? When do we hear cells? You hear terrorist cell.
yeah,
This, that.
yeah. That's
They call them cells. If there's a book, people that, boy, if you're a reader, there was a book, John Quinones, he's usually works as a reporter, and he's worked for everybody. You know, probably at least one station that you like and one that you hate, because he's been on both sides of the equation. He's very fair and balanced kind of an individual. But John Quinones wrote a book called Wonderland, and he breaks down this entire process from, this was heroin at the time, right? Now that's gone, but from where it was being grown in Mexico to how it was getting across the border, and how these guys went, like they would say, go into a town, go to the methadone clinic, park in front of the methadone clinic, and find 3 or 4 people stomping out of it looking angry, right? Get them into the car, give them 20, 30 bags, and say they're free. I just want you to hand my phone number out to people. And every person who calls, right, who buys from me daily, I'll give you 2 bags a week for. Now, if you're an addict, you're going to go out and market the hell out of that. You know, a person finds 25 people that call him daily, he's set. And this was the concept. That's called a cell, right? And originally the cells were just California. And then as people realized that, you know, the competition for this was too much, well, we'll just go east, right? We'll just go a little further east. And pretty soon you got cells in Salt Lake City. And then it just keeps going across the entire country. And it breaks my heart. I've talked about this on the boat before, but when I was in college, I wrote a paper on drugs, and the state of Vermont had never had an arrest for heroin. Imagine that for a second, right? I'm not talking, the 1920s. This was almost 1990. And they had never had anyone even arrested for it. It was a non-thing. Now, it is the second fastest state in the union in terms of growth for overdose deaths and opiate abuse and addiction. Why? Because cells got there, right? To get there, give out as much as you need to give out to create a market. This is fent. How much do you think you got to give out before you get a market? Right? You let somebody do it for 5 days, they can't say no on day 6. This is the strongest opiate that you can do without, well, actually I was going to say without dying, but plenty of people are dying, right? Yes, Patrick, I'm not sure why, but do email me after the show.
Yeah.
If you're going through it.
I was going to stop you. That's why I was kind of waiting to find a good spot there. Yeah, he seems like he's struggling a little bit. So,
and I've spoken with Patrick.
Okay.
Patrick, reach out to me, brother.
let's make sure we're okay there. I want to make sure Patrick's all right.
Yeah.
Seems like he's going through it there a little bit.
Yep. It happens, man.
Yep.
This is a tough time of year, and he's been I think he's moving in the right direction. He's been super open and super honest, and that's really the start of this. So people, as you start breaking this down, this can really depress the hell out of you, right? As people who have been addicted to substances, you start thinking to yourself, what's the point, right? The people who should want to help us don't. I called Mark up over the course of our weekend, right, the last 2 days off, because there was a clip of film that is so disturbing. We're trying to find it because we're going to.
I think I found it. I got to make a short out of it still.
It's just, is it depressing? There's a reporter that shouts at the president, as close as you are to the southern border, are you going to go and visit the border? And his response was priceless. Keep in mind, nothing is killing more Americans, right? Nothing. This dwarfs, no lie, people, if you do the math, it dwarfs every war we've ever had, right? World War I, World War II. You look at the numbers, World War II is what, 260,000 people?
Yep.
We're going to lose that in the next 2 years or worse, right? Nothing is killing Americans, and nothing ever has like this is. So when they yelled, don't you think you should stop by the border? He said, no, there's way more important stuff to do. We got a business deal that's coming through that's going to create some jobs. That was the response, right? This is a huge venture. Okay, there won't be everybody to work them, right? Honestly,
it's more important
because the number one cause of death in this country is what's coming across that border, and we concentrate really heavily on the deaths for obvious reasons, right? Because there's no helping a dead person. Once they're gone, there's no way to get them sober or her sober. There's no way to help that person live their best life. So we concentrate really heavily on the deaths. What about the people who are strung out and alive? Watch some of the documentaries on what the lifestyles for these people are.
Yep.
I was that guy. I was the guy that had to go out and steal every single day. How about the loss to society? Do you realize the number of businesses who are going, we're done? We're done. We're closing our doors because there are so many addicts running through the front door, grabbing arms full of stuff and running out, right? And forget the politics of that, because all the time I hear, well, they made the laws so easy that now people are stealing to make. People are not stealing to get rich. I promise you they're not, right? That's not a mindset of anybody that can do anything else thinks, I'm just going to go rob this store, then I'm going to go and get rid of all of these things, and I'm going to be. I can pay for my drug habit. Seriously, if you think I'm wrong, look at the statistics for people in prison. 80%, right, of people in prison are in there for drugs or committing crimes to get into. So then you take away 80%, 80 out of 100. Now you got the freaks that rape people, right, and people that kill people. Now, there's the rest of it.
Yeah.
It's insane. But this entire plan of action that these people have been pushing it's not winnable. And one of the scariest quotes, I've said this so many times on the lifeboat, but I was watching a documentary and they were asking a former drug czar about the war on drugs, and they said, do you think there's any chance that it will ever be winnable? And he said, no, but it's fundable. All of these little people don't want to give up their kingdoms. Right? If you're the drug czar, you got any idea what your budget is? The amount of money that these people can blow. It's like Mark was saying, that the $500 wrench or the $2,000 toilet seat. How the hell do you keep track of $2.2 billion? And that's just the DEA, or 2.3 or whatever it is.
It's crazy. They
just the DEA. Go ahead.
They lay these big, whatever you want to call them, that depend on where they're at in the process, bills and laws and everything else is getting laid out there. And when you see them, there is no way that any one of us could sit down and read it. There's like so many pages. The things are huge. They're books and books and books for one certain thing. So what I'm trying to say is just the overwhelming look of that deters people like just a normal person trying to read something like that, and then take it to a step further, try to understand any of it. And that's, the vocabulary there is written in a way that the normal person is not going to be able to understand what's even saying. And, so I just think it's just one of those things that they do. And I don't know. It's frustrating for us. It's frustrating for us because at the end of the day, what it's doing is it's costing lives that don't need to be. It just doesn't need to be that way. And it's really frustrating when we could be doing something about it and we're all just sitting around. Not all of us. When I'm saying all, I'm talking about,
Right.
But they could be doing something. They could. And they know they could. And it's all about the funding. It's what it comes down to. It's always been. Always has been. I think Tommy kind of laid that out pretty clear tonight. It's about the funding. It's about the money. And it's about whatever they're trying to get done for their own personal, whatever they're doing.
For their own political ends. And this is the part that is downright depressing. To feel like you're a pawn in this thing. I mean, for the war on drugs to have started because there were people protesting a war and some of them had the audacity to be black, right? And to hear the quote, we wanted to break up their meetings and homes. We wanted to disrupt their communities. Good Lord. You realize how many people are sitting in prison because of that initial plan? And there's something that is just for me ironic that this war on drugs is the same age as I am, right? This entire thing started the year I was born.
That's crazy to think, isn't it?
This myth. It is. And it's a myth. There's no, there really is no war on drugs.
There's a problem with drugs.
Imagine if they found out some of the drugs would make powerful rocket fuel. Daniel, it's funny you say that because they may have found out that it's going to make a heck of a weapon. No, the only reason that we say that is because there's a lot of funding being done right now to make an antidote, right? In the form of a V, the word we can't say on here, but in the form of a V that they, give somebody. And we wholeheartedly are of the belief. Oh, send a link. Could you?
I got it. Okay.
Right. That it's. Yeah, I mean, and I've done some of that is rocket fuel. Way back in the day, rocket fuel.
Yeah, and guys, keep in mind that Daniel and Tommy are not kidding about that. That is not a joke. That is the fact. Some of that is they could literally power a rocket with it. So just understand that.
Kill an elephant or
it's
absolutely ridiculous.
Some of the stuff that we will put into ourselves, our own bodies, is crazy to me. It just
Leisure, I agree with you. It's not a rabbit hole I'll go down, but boy, do I agree with you, bud. I really do. Not gonna dive down that one. I'm sure we'll be out of business by tomorrow night, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I really understand what you're saying. Buddha, where have you been? Buddha, if you're gonna be late.
I think Niall's here. You here, Niall?
Yes.
Hey, what's up, brother? How you doing, man?
Thank you. I'm very sorry for being late
to
the meeting, as they say in age.
You're good. How are you, Niall?
Yeah. It's actually great, Tommy.
Good.
And it was good to hear from you today.
Always nice to hear your voice, Niall, and everybody else loves it too. So.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I'm aware that we don't have a huge amount of time, but
we got some. Go ahead.
Actually, I kind of it's not a departure from what you were talking about or what you talk about every day on this amazing channel. Is that I'm in touch with a good friend of mine who's an American, who I've known for 2 years, who is a Native American, comes from Tennessee, Cookville, Tennessee, not far from Nashville. And hard-working American guy, and we have a lot in common. And we want to start a channel. And he's completely aware of who I am. I'm an alcoholic,
right?
Recovering alcoholic. He's actually seen the videos that I've done with you.
Oh, all right.
And he thinks they're extraordinary. And he's what you might call a right-wing conservative in the States, you know.
That part of the country grows him.
He's a heavy metal fan. And we've been speaking for 2 years, and we've been speaking for the last 6 months about starting a channel. And I was thinking to myself, I have to talk to Tommy about this. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe I'll just bring this on the air.
There you
Right?
go.
Because I know what starting a channel is like for you guys. So it's not specifically about sobriety. It's about sobriety. Um, of course, yeah, I would demand that, but it's also about philosophy and living and what alcohol and drugs has done to our society, which this guy's very aware of, and we would introduce different family scenarios into it, and some stuff about music and movies, but very heavy kind of stuff. But it wouldn't be like a sobriety channel in inverted commas. And so he's like, no, we have to do this because when we get on the phone to each other or on FaceTime or whatever, we tend to spend like 2 to 3 hours speaking about the aspects of sobriety that are not available in our current system. And he's not an addict of any kind, but he sees the damage that full-scale drug abuse and alcoholism does to our society. And he listens to me and he says, "No, you have to explain this somehow." And so I think my reason for ringing in is just to say that I'm very passionate about sobriety. You know that, Tommy.
Yeah, no question.
And I tend to go about it in a very kind of philosophical way at times, which loses some people. But I think that there's room for you to tell me whether there is room for a person who is not an addict to combine with a person who is an addict and make a message successful.
I think the interplay between the two could be fascinating.
Yep.
Honestly, I mean, we spend so much time talking about, the normal people, but to have one right next to you, to have someone who could sort of weigh in, because let's be really honest, the way they view us and the way we view them, right? The us and them with people who are sober and people who aren't. No, I think that there's, as long as you guys defer to each other on the subject matters that, you can weigh in, but, leave him to the expert on, on someone who doesn't know that life. And he should absolutely defer to you as the expert for someone who knows, because one of the only area where I think that this could, would backfire is if, he weighs in on if you would just quit what you're doing. I mean, you have perspective on things that he doesn't, and vice versa. I think it could be fascinating. I'd love to watch it.
As long as both of them could actually, give their opinions and not get mad at one another when they have different ones.
And that takes some skill.
It does. It really truly does.
Live.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and there is some irony here in that. I think a lot of the success of the vote is down to that gray area that I just described. Mm-hmm. There are some people who are still in a full-blown addiction. There are some people who are sober like myself. There are some people who are kind of halfway in between, the kind of, but the philosophical kind of neurological aspects, the chemical aspects that you described so eloquently on the show are permeating through their brain. And all of a sudden you get this kind of group environment, which is very special. And the lifeboat is just going to go way up there, and it's something I want to tap into, not because I want something for myself. It's just I think it's a very, very good trajectory that the lifeboat is taking, and I think that there is a kind of a gray area that addicts and non-addicts can meet in, because ultimately we're talking about symptoms here, Tommy and Mark.
Yeah.
It's all about symptoms.
I agree.
It's just about symptoms of a disease.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question.
100.
And you know what? I don't think that there could be, there's 56 or 57 now million channels on YouTube. And I know of about 11 or 12 that do what, that talk about drugs, but, in sort of a, you can get off of this. There are educational channels that just literally do it like a classroom. Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol is the active ingredient in marijuana.
Yeah.
I mean, but for people that are actually, talking, the way that you're talking about, there's a
Yeah.
handful of them. I don't think that I don't think there's enough of them, and I don't think that in my lifetime there will ever be enough of them.
Well,
It's a great
I'll
avenue to help people.
I'll stick my neck out, Tommy, here, and say that this is one of them, and that's yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you, man.
I really, I do. I really appreciate that.
Because what you do is you put a bridge between both areas of thinking about you kind of cross the bridge between addicts and non-addicts in a way that non-addicts can kind of identify with in their everyday lives. That's why, in fact, if you were to go through your scroll, or I'm not sure whether you check these things. Of course you can't. It's impossible. But I would think that in the last year or so, given the huge jump in the amount of people who are visiting the channel, I would think it's because of your approach. It's because you're not like shoving something down people's throats.
Right.
Sobriety is like, if you're not sober, you have to.
Don't show up here if you've had a beer. Yeah.
So I think that's the identification process is unique, and I personally find it fascinating. And I wanted to jump on. I wanted to speak to you earlier. I knew that you were in the office.
No, I have a
You
question.
couldn't speak. Yes,
I have
of
a
course.
question for you. Are you guys going to be able to, the time differences between you and Tennessee is going to make that a little interesting. I really would love to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's about 6 hours.
It's 6. Yeah, he's East Coast. Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's
It's not as
bad.
bad as what you were thinking there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not 8 hours like you.
Yeah. No, I would love to see that. Honestly.
Yeah, no,
I
it's just something. I just wanted your feedback live on air, and I just said,
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to speak to you personally.
Do you guys have a time frame, Niall?
Well, we're just discussing it, but I think it's like one thing I've noticed when we speak, and we've known each other for 2 years. Our conversations tend to last about 3 hours, and they're kind of cyclical in nature. So it's like
I'm familiar, Mark.
we start with one point and we kind of go around right the way around the ballpark until we end up in the same place.
Yeah.
So where he is in his life and where I am in my life more or less ends up in the same place. And all of these kind of sobriety issues tend to make sense in his head and my head by the time we get to the end.
Makes it so much easier, Niall. It really does. That's
yeah,
the way
yeah.
me and Tommy are. There's so many things we don't have to say to one another, and it makes.
But that's why I was thinking that, because I talk all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it can't be limited to an hour. That would be ridiculous. I would say at least 2 hours. So it's just. I'm sure you started off with something completely different tonight, and I'm sorry for showing up late. But,
That's awesome.
Yeah, you're that's and Niall, the number of times people have reached out to me after you've come on or we've done an interview or whatever, that either said directly the guy should start a channel, or said something similar enough. Like, boy, if I could see that guy more, I would go and watch. You got to let us know when you get it up and running.
Yeah,
and we'll give out the address to everybody on the boat.
And we have obviously the main goal here is to save people, right? But
Yeah.
I think if we had a second goal, it would be get people to do what we are doing. More people out there doing this.
Yeah.
And
Spreading this as much as
I
possible.
think in order to save people, we have to talk to people, and we have to relate to people, and that takes time.
Yep.
And the lifeboat is succeeding now because Tommy is such an eloquent speaker and so sharp. And Mark, you're such a supportive influence that those two, it's absolute magic what you've created. That's why the lifeboat is going where it is.
I appreciate
So
that.
it's an inspiration to me So part of the reason why I wanted to come in is just to say how you inspire me.
Thank
I
you.
mean,
I appreciate
when I had those interviews with you, I mean, honesty was just on the plate from the word go. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't negated. It wasn't, it was just like you just spill your guts.
Didn't have to say it, did you?
You as well, yeah. It was, I mean, that was
Yeah.
really.
It just
in fact, I think that was everybody's takeaway. I remember, I honestly had people that reached out after your first one when you were talking about your kids that just said, "Well, I was in tears listening to that,"
Yeah.
you know. And you know what? Now that's probably. It's really funny. I had a guy that I think I've told this story before, but I had a guy I used to work with in sales, and he would say, the key to it is sincerity, and once you can BS that, you're fine. The reason that I think more people don't do the kind of show you're talking about is because you just can't fake it. You're either going to be really sincere and honest, or you're not comfortable being that kind of honest. And I think you're made for it, Niall. I think it would be awesome.
Yes.
No, so again, it's not about me. It's in support of the lifeboat.
Well, I would very much like to see it.
And
see it
it's
support the lifeboat.
it's
Love it.
inspired by the lifeboat. And my friend has seen all my shows, and he has watched some of the stuff. He says some of the stuff about fentanyl he doesn't know about, but he says the honesty that comes out from this guy is just extraordinary, and the sense of this unique capability to draw his audience in to something that is incredibly dangerous and powerfully misunderstood is also extraordinary.
Well, we would love to. I'd love to come over and talk to you guys. Maybe do a
Yeah.
show with you guys when you get it up and running. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. In the meantime, I'll have to get back on for an interview at one stage.
I'd love it.
Yeah, for real.
Yep, absolutely love it. Yeah, let us know when.
Yes.
Thank you, brothers.
Please. Yep.
I know.
Niall,
Come
thanks so
here.
much for calling in, man. Always a pleasure.
Yep. Love you now. See you, bud.
You
Take
know
care.
what?
Bye-bye.
He's cut out for it. He
Oh
really
yeah, most definitely cut out for it. I mean, my gosh, and I don't think I've ever heard him say anything that wasn't thought out.
is. No,
I
for
mean,
sure.
wow, yeah,
And the point he brought up too about the honesty. I mean, that I remember there were so many times in all of the interviews, but the first one really stuck out, where there were so many times where he would say something and you would just think, man, to say that to anybody would be difficult. To say it to a live broadcast. Yeah, it was just.
it's amazing when people come
Yep.
on here and do that, and
It trickles down.
it really does, and I think that people watch that, and then what it does is when they come on, it kind of takes a wall down. It really does. People aren't so afraid to come on and speak and tell us what's going on. I think it's very important that happens, and all that stuff comes together, and that's why we keep doing what we're doing, and that's why we're here. So, and I'm glad
And we're here right at the top of the hour.
Yes, we are.
Well, you know what, people? It's always fun to come back that first Monday after a couple of days off. Always makes you feel better too, because this is a huge part of our program, so to speak. And Johnny, if you're late again, this late, man, just don't do it, man. You don't want to see where we'll go with this. Johnny just showed up, man. He shows up in time for the cat in the basket. Yeah. I swear to you, her ears just went like this, like she just perked up when I said that. All righty, everybody. We are going to be back tomorrow night. Same squirrel time, same squirrel channel. And we're going to be talking about something fun. I promise you. I am Captain Tommy Scoble, and on the other side of the glass,
Captain Mark Wages.
and that's a cat in a basket. Good night, everybody. We love you.